We know there's a gender imbalance in IT. We've known about it for at least a decade, and there's been lots of articles in the press about the imbalance. So surely things have got better because of the exposure to the problem over the last decade.
You'd like to think so. I have a phrase for women in IT jobs. It's worse than you think, and it's not getting better. How much worse? Assuming the long-term goal is parity, 50% women, we're not even halfway there. It looks like in the developed world in 2016, lower than 24% of IT roles worldwide will be filled by women. And when we look over the last 5, 10 years in multiple countries, we see that the numbers are up marginally, flat, or in 2 countries' case, actually fallen by 1% over the last 5 years.
So can you tell us a bit more about the disparities by market and also by role? So how does it vary?
Well, when we look at it globally, United States is probably the most diverse at around 24%. Canada and Sweden are around 22% women. England, UK rather, bringing up the rear, I'm afraid, at about 17.5%. Significant variation in all those countries by roles. In the US, for example, web developers, a more recent form of technology role, 35% women, whereas maybe some more old guard technologies like sysadmins or database administrators, those might be as low as 10 to 13%. So lots of variation within it.
So let's look at some of the causes of this disparity. So starting off with education, and it's long been known that there are relatively few women who do computer science and other maths courses at university.
We call that the pipeline. Is there a pipeline problem in IT and women? Yes. About 18% of computer science students at university in both the UK and the US are women, obviously very low. But it's not just university. We can go earlier in high school. They're not taking the preparatory courses you would need to go on. And even in elementary school, even very young girls are not taking the courses or the extra credit computer camps that might lead to this kind of career.
Okay, now let's assume that we fix education and there is parity at all levels. So what happens then? So what is the, for example, the recruitment balance like?
It's a big problem. Recruitment's a problem. Only 17% of people applying for IT jobs in the UK are women. Other issues around recruitment relate to things like the algorithms, the software that actually shows job advertisements to applicants have been studied, and they have gender bias. They show certain jobs to men and certain to women. So there's a problem even at that level of recruitment.
Okay, well, let's fix that. And then what happens when it comes to hiring? Surely it must be better there.
Well, okay, there's 2 fixes. First of all, we need more women in hiring. Great, problem solved, except it isn't. Studies have shown that women hiring managers display many of the same unconscious biases in favor of male applicants. So even that won't be enough. There are, in fact, tech companies that are introducing training on how to address those unconscious biases.
Okay, and then the next step is, once you get the few women who do get into IT jobs, to keep them there. So what's the track record of IT in that regard?
Dreadful. Women are 50% more likely to leave in their first year, and the 5-year number is just as bad. Women are not being retained by IT companies. They leave the field.
And what are the main reasons for the poor retention levels?
There's a number. I'll touch on one of them a little later, but there is one thing I should mention. It's called the bro-grammar culture, the idea that largely male-dominated workplaces may still have some unconscious or even conscious sexist attitudes that are keeping women out. That's something that certainly needs to be addressed.
And then, surely the women that are recruited, to keep them there, don't they get promoted? Isn't there some kind of help in that regard?
They're by and large not being promoted enough. There are some exceptions. Canada and the US do a little better at senior women in technology, but they're not getting paid the same. It's not, the gender pay gap isn't quite as bad in IT as it is in some industries, but you're still looking at many women making, with similar experiences, making 85 to 90 cents on the dollar for their male counterparts.
Now, if we were to quantify what does this mean, let's say at the economic level, is there a way of showing the impacts of that? I mean, is there an impact?
These sorts of economic studies are problematic, but one UK study suggested that the gender imbalance in IT in the UK was costing the economy $4 billion a year, which makes it a tens of billions of dollar problem globally.
That's pretty significant. Now, if we go back to the start, when we're talking about the 24% of women in IT jobs, I've been hearing about these studies showing that when you look at tech companies, the ratio of women is higher. Are these just anomalous companies? So what's the reason for that discrepancy?
There's two issues. The first issue is that these technology companies are frequently disclosing the percentage of their total workforce that are women. Of course, they're not all IT jobs, so it may be obscuring the fact that they have low IT. The other thing is that as large public companies, they're sort of in the spotlight, and they are making real strides in getting more women in both the companies and in IT roles. My bigger concern is that when we look at IT as a sector, banks, retailers, they'll have IT departments, but they'll be small, and they probably won't be disclosing their diversity levels in those sort of sub-pockets. So we really need to look at this holistically and look at the industry as a whole.
Now, looking at the topic of gender imbalance in IT, it seems to be unalloyed bad news. So the current view, the past view, the future view, the view by market, by role, everything. Can you give us one glimpse of hope for the future in this regard?
I'll give you two. One of them is that companies write ads for IT jobs, and there are certain words that are deterrents. They actually steer women away. Companies are now using software to check for those words, get rid of them, and the number of IT applicants has begun to rise. But another one, and women are not always about this issue, but it did matter. One company extended maternity leave from 3 months to 5 months, partial pay to full pay. Female retention went up 50% in a year. So there are solutions, there are best practices. There's a whole list of them in the full prediction.